This episode powered by Bay Photo. Quality, service, innovation. Use code SHUTTER15MET for 15% off metal prints with any frame or mount display. Offer valid through June 30th, only at bayphoto.com.
I'm Sal Cincotta, and this is Shutter Network. Morning, good afternoon, good evening. No matter where you are in the world, welcome to Shutter Network. We have an amazing episode for you here today, so stay tuned. We've got the co-authors of The Art of Capturing Love. We've got Thea Dodds and Kathryn Hamm with us today. We are going to talk some amazing stuff. I've been educated this morning, or just over lunch, I should say. We've had some interesting conversations, so we're going to share all those conversations with you for sure. But before we get started, like usual, I'd love to just kind of dig into just things going on in the industry, some things in the news, if you will. First of all, Hasselblad. Huge rumor right now. I don't know if you're a medium format camera person or not, but Hasselblad has been a name that has been just synonymous with high quality imagery for a very long time. And there's a big rumor going on that they're having some financial trouble. So just things to keep in mind. You've seen definitely some heavy hitters from Hasselblad leaving the company, going to other medium format companies. As you know, many of you, I use Phase 1, but I'm a huge fan of medium format. So it's definitely sad to see. And personal opinion, for whatever it's worth, big misstep by Hasselblad. You could see that they were trying to go after the DSLR market, if you will, when they rebranded one of their Hasselblads, or took a Sony camera and rebranded it as a Hasselblad, but they charged 5 times the price or 3 times the price. And so it's just, it's typical as business owners. We all have to be conscious of these things. How do we brand our products? How do we position our products? What are people willing to pay for it? And so there's nothing wrong with going after that mid-market, right? You're seeing car companies like Mercedes-Benz, Toyota, or Lexus, I should say, right? They push into this kind of mid-market where there's more money, right? If you're a business person, you understand that bell curve. 80% of the market sits right in the middle. And so it looks like that's what Hasselblad was trying to do, but huge, huge miss, because what you end up doing is cheapening your brand. And so as photographers, right, there's always a lesson to be learned here. As photographers, we have to ask ourselves, where does our brand sit? Are we going after the $500 wedding, or are we going after the $10,000 wedding? There's no right or wrong answer, but you have to know who your target is. So if you're a $10,000 wedding photographer and you start trying to go after that $500 wedding because you want to do more volume, you're going to actually cheapen your brand. And vice versa. If you're kind of the mass production photography house where you've got 30 shooters working under you, you're not going to be able to easily go after that $10,000 wedding because you're going to be perceived as the low-cost provider. And so I feel like, as a lesson learned, Hasselblad is really struggling here in understanding their demographic and understanding how to really connect with them. So we need to learn from that. Also big in the news, if you've been following me at all, you know that I'm now using a Phantom drone. And this is my new, we call it a toy, but it's not really a toy, it's a tool. And so what I love about this is I can now add this video element to what we're doing, right? So I just recently photographed a wedding, and we were on the top of a hospital. We were on the helipad with the bride and groom, and we had the drone just come up and just with a GoPro on it and create this amazing footage that I would never, ever be able to get with just a standard camera or from a normal vantage point, right? So these things are really, they're $3,000. And what's starting to happen is they're everywhere. And so now the FAA is actually starting to ban these, which is going to be really interesting, because how do you police something like that? They're basically saying you can't use them, you need a permit, a commercial license to use it over 400 feet. But again, it's one of those laws they're putting in place, like you have to have a permit to shoot in a public park. Like, who's enforcing this stuff? And so it just makes you wonder. And here in St. Louis, on the news just yesterday or 2 days ago, apparently someone flew a drone into one of the buildings, one of the skyscrapers downtown. So that's kind of funny. And no, it wasn't mine. I have my drone, thank God. What else is going on? Amazon has patented basic photography techniques. So I don't know if you've read about this. Definitely go out there and Google it. But now Amazon has put a patent on a lighting setup. So check this out. If you're shooting on a white seamless background with a certain lighting setup, a 4-light setup or a 5-light setup, apparently now Amazon has the patent for this. Just kind of makes you smile, doesn't it? So how exactly is that working? Is Amazon now going to come to your studio and sue you for infringement or something like that? No. So if you're wondering why Amazon is doing something like that, it's really to protect the way they photograph their products. So if you see products that are on Amazon, that Amazon is selling, and they go through this photography process, right? There's usually like 1 or 2 guys sitting in a room with lighting set up, and they put their products there, and they crank through 100 products a day. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to protect that, I'm assuming, from eBay. But it's just one of those laws that make you, laugh, if you will, because how are they going to enforce a patent like that, right? It just doesn't even make sense. So it'll be interesting. So keep an eye on that. As photographers, I think, we have to keep an eye on stuff like that. I don't know, do we now go out and patent every lighting setup that's out there? It doesn't seem like it would be worth it. Also, some things I think are cool. I love sharing with you. Obviously, we're about education, and I love sharing some cool educational things that my fellow photographers are doing. I don't know if you've ever heard of these 2 guys, Ryan Shembri and Rocco Ancora. If you've never heard of them, go out there, Google them right now, look them up. These are 2 guys out of Australia. Amazing, amazing wedding photographers. These are 2 guys that I look up to, I've looked up for a number of years. Add to that list Jerry Guionis as well. These are 3 Aussies that just, I think, produce amazing work, and I'm always looking to them for inspiration, as you can as well. So I want to tell you about this thing they got. It's a video that I watched, I found use in, and Ryan and Rocco came up with something called Be an Assistant for a Day. And it's basically a behind-the-scenes video following them around on an actual wedding day. So if you've ever been curious about how do they pose, how do they direct, how do they communicate with their clients, this is a great, great video. Now, I will tell you, it's normally a $200 video, but I haggled for you. We got a 50% off code, valid through June 15th, and the code is behind. So use the, I don't know, they came up with the code behind. But use the code behind for, I guess, behind the shutter, and you will get 50% off. So you get this video for 99 bucks. It's a 2-hour video, well worth a watch. I enjoyed it. I watched it. I think you'll enjoy it as well. All right, so here's what we need to do. Today, it is all about being social, right? Hashtag Shutter Network, and I want you to hashtag Capturing Love today, because we have got the co-authors of the book, The Art of Capturing Love. We've got Thea Dodds and Kathryn Hamm with us today, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with them. So obviously before we go on air, I've been talking to them for a few hours and just having this amazing conversation just about the state of the industry, same-sex weddings, the future, the ignorance behind it, the things people just don't understand, the dumb questions we all want to ask, but we don't know who to ask. They are here today, and we are going to have a blast with them. So very educational segment. Don't go away. Like I said, get social, hashtag Shutter Network, hashtag Capturing Love. We're going to give away their book, The Art of Capturing Love, and we're going to talk more about it today. This book is just amazing. The production value of it is just incredible, right? We all love having something tactile. I know you want to read your Kindle or your iPad, but there's something to be said about having this in your hand and just feeling it. And I don't know, maybe because we're about to take our magazine into print that I'm very sensitive to printing things, but it's an amazing, well-produced book, and there actually is information in there that I think is valuable to us all. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
This segment powered by Tamron. Check out the dates for the Tamron Tailgate Tour at tamron-usa.com/tailgate.
All right, everyone, welcome back. And as promised, I am here with the amazing co-authors of The New Art of Capturing Love. I'm here with Thea Dodds and Kathryn Hamm. Welcome, ladies. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Sal. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. We've had an awesome discussion over lunch, and it's been educational for me, and I think I know a lot about photography, but I'm always excited to learn about new things. And this isn't just about photography, it's really just about, I think, life in general. So before we get going, Thea, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a wedding photographer. I've been doing this for going on 9 years now. I live in New Hampshire, the great state, the live free or die state. And I've been lucky enough to be photographing same-sex weddings since 2005.
Wow. And what got you into same-sex weddings?
Well, it's just, the laws changed in New Hampshire, in Massachusetts 2004, so that's where my first same-sex wedding was. And then in 2008, New Hampshire also changed their laws, and Vermont as well. So you're really in this, New England has been a hot spot for same-sex weddings. So we've been seeing legal elopements, we've been seeing destination weddings in addition to serving the local residents. So it's just it's just a reality of where I live. That's the clientele.
And that's the right word. It is the reality of just life in general, you know. And this is an interesting subject, and we'll talk more about it today as we go through. But it's interesting because there's people out there who are just, I think, really ignorant, just to maybe not even their point of views. Everybody's entitled to their point of view, right? That's the world we live in. But just they're ignorant, and I'm one of those people, by the way, that are ignorant just on how to run or conduct themselves on a same-sex wedding. And I'm excited to learn more as well today. Kathryn, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I will open before I introduce myself to say I wouldn't necessarily call it ignorant. I would say it's more of a lack of exposure, which I see as really different. I think, to me, ignorance sounds more like remaining in a stuck place, and I think there are a lot of people out there that are curious or maybe afraid to admit that, or maybe they haven't thought of it yet.
That's a good point.
But I think that there are, the majority of people, it's a much softer place, basically.
Yeah.
So, Kathryn Hamm, and I'm the president of GayWeddings.com. I would say that the best way to define me in a most stable way would be as an educator. That's what I used to do before my straight mom founded our business back in 1999. And then I sort of got pulled into the family business. I had no idea that this is where I would end up, but when I look at what I'm doing, it is all about education, and it's all about making a difference. And those are things that are very important to me, and those are common threads that have existed throughout the course of my professional life.
Can we talk about your mom for a second?
Sure,
Because
yeah.
she's a pioneer in many ways, is she not?
She is.
She
She's
started
amazing.
this in 1999.
She did.
And I can really relate because I am close with my mom as well. And we started a business together many years ago. And there's something to be said about a family business. But give the audience a little bit of history on why your mom in 1999 decided to do this.
Or as we like to refer to it as the first .com boom, right?
Exactly.
And she was in her 60s, I guess it was, at the time that she founded the company. And so we don't think in the same ways now about this kind of thing happening. But back then, this was just really revolutionary on so many levels. So my now wife, my partner at the time, and I had decided to have a wedding. We were amongst the first of our gay and lesbian friends to do so. We had no idea what we were doing, and what we were doing was going to be much more representative of what felt right to us, which was let's bring a lot of our favorite people to this really fun place and play all weekend.
It's a celebration.
Exactly. And you know, we're all trying to find our way through it. And in the course of the way, we have some very funny friends, and two of them decided they needed to throw us a wedding shower. And my mom, who's born and bred Dallas, Texas, full out.
Is this where the wedding was going to take place in Dallas?
No, the wedding happened in Maryland. I live in the Washington, D.C. area.
Was it legal at that point in time?
Oh, no.
It wasn't legal
No,
anywhere.
not even like a, you know.
So we were blazing trails.
There's right, exactly. Everyone's like, what? And actually, I will say that not only were many of the of our LGBT family and friends who were there, they had never been to a gay wedding before. So it was all of our first gay wedding in some respects. We'd had a few friends, so we'd had some experience, which was part of what led us to be willing to do it. But it was really this, no one knew what was going on. There are stories to be told, and this includes the place that actually held the wedding and the interactions we had with the staff. And it was, the whole thing was fantastic. So my friends threw a bridal shower, and they say we'd like irony just a little bit. So they had done it up with all the trimmings, and my mom, of course, ate it up, including that she walks in the door having flown in from Dallas for the shower, and they present her with a corsage, which she was just like, now we're talking. I like this wedding stuff. They knew her number. And she had begun to share this experience that while she was looking to find a wedding album for us, she couldn't find a thing. And she tells the story about going down to what was then called the Crossroads Market. It was the gay and lesbian bookstore in Dallas. She found her way down to the gay neighborhood and went into the market thinking, for sure I can find what I need at the gay bookstore, at the gift shop. She says she looks around, she doesn't see anything like this, and she goes up to the storekeep and says essentially in her way, now I'm looking for a wedding album for my daughter and her partner. They're getting married. You know, do you have something? No, never heard of it. Don't think anything like that exists. And my mom says, you know, I thought everything had been invented. How is that possible that this does not exist? So she was telling the story because it was this real light bulb moment for her. And at the shower, someone said, oh, why don't you start twobrides.com? And again, this is a very flippant, funny, everyone has something interesting to say kind of group. And my mom's response was, well, I will. And we went through the wedding planning, had the wedding, and she had hardly gotten home that she was drafting a business plan and bought the domains, which again, this is 1999.
I know.
So we weren't using Google
right
regularly, you know, people weren't, you know, it's a whole different world.
And she's 65 years old at the time.
The whole thing shows, about a little early 60s. We'll say
we don't
early
want to age
60s.
mom. It's never good.
So, and she found this wonderful consultant who developed the website. And again, this is building e-commerce shop because we were originally just online boutiques providing invitations, cake tops, gifts, things like that. They designed them from scratch. So your viewers that love the web, they can go back into the time machine and find what is essentially, roughly, the very original sites, twobrides.com and of course, twogrooms.com, as my mom always said. Now we don't want to forget my grooms.
Yeah.
And she really, in doing this, was, the community responded like she was a surrogate parent for them. Because so many of them had parents who did not support their relationships.
Right.
They didn't want to hear anything about a wedding. So what she was doing was powerful for me, it was powerful for the community, but it made a real difference for so many of the gays and lesbians at the time who were wanting to have ceremonies. But one of the most painful things is it's hard enough to come out. You're lucky enough to find someone that you want to spend the rest of your life with, and then you stand the chance, if you haven't already potentially been rejected by a parent, now you're going to tell them that you're going to stand up and proclaim it to the world. And back then, this was a very difficult thing. It still is today in some areas, but certainly back then, a lot more shame, a lot more fear. I mean, my mom talked about telling her friends, oh, my daughter's engaged. And she said I would have this whole conversation, never mentioning gender, until finally I'd realized, all right, I got to fish or cut bait. If I need to like tell the full story, like, oh, by the way, it's a woman. Anyway, they're having this awesome day. So, so that's really the story. And then I was teaching at the time and left a school I had been in. I had a social work degree, the whole 9 yards. And I also had a brief background in sales and marketing. I said, let me help you with this. And I'd always helped her along the way, but became more involved, and one thing led to another. And then I was running, day-to-day operations and trying to build out the website. We acquired gayweddings.com just after I came on board, and now we identify as the largest online resource and boutique dedicated to serving same-sex couples since 1999.
And so gayweddings.com, for our audience, I want them to go out there. Please go out there, check it out.
Yeah.
It's not only for products that you're selling for that niche, but it's for educational as well, right?
So that's what's, who we have become has been part of the evolution. I know you appreciate this as an entrepreneur and businessman, and many of your viewers probably do as well, is that this started because there weren't products available, so my mom wanted to get those to market. And then by the time I was becoming more active and involved, we were getting more calls from couples saying, how can I find wedding professionals who aren't going to hang up the phone on me? And wedding professionals were saying, I want to be able to help same-sex couples, so can you help us connect? So we ended up designing a very rudimentary at the time vendor directory in order to help connect the two. And then it was around 2004, 2005 when the early days of blogging began to take root and take hold. So I was actually blogging under Gay Wedding Fodder. And then that then lent to us then producing more content. And this is exactly how I ended up meeting Thea along the way, was that as Two Bright Lights, I don't know, many of your photographers may also be familiar with it, a wonderful service that they came onto the scene, and I was like, well, let me try this. I mean, I have a hard time finding photographs. More people were willing to share them, but again, 10 years ago, we were like, we're gonna send you your products on a blank label. We're gonna use our corporation name, our S-Corp, not gayweddings.com, not twobrides.com, because we don't want to freak out people around you. So when we started, we would hide our brand when we sent stuff to protect people's privacy. That's how much things have changed.
Yeah.
So Thea had submitted a real wedding to our website, and this was sort of that next wave of change, where it's not just that I can produce content to talk about what I'm seeing, to tell our story, to try to help get information to couples or to professionals, but then it's, wow, there are all these photographers who are now out there photographing more couples, but on top of that, the couples are like, sure, go ahead and submit it to that website. And so now we get to showcase folks that are happy to share their weddings.
It's inspirational.
And people are, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we went from hidden to just full-on inspiration, and that has been really fun, and I would say this is where it's really marked. That to me was, things are really beginning to change. This market is really shifting.
I think it's a huge market. And again, I'm an entrepreneur, right? So sure, there's a part of me that's an opportunist, but I want to photograph people who are getting married. That's kind of my job. That's your job, right? That's how I make my money. I don't want to photograph people who aren't getting married. You know, you look at some parts of the world, and there's like 70% of the population is not married. They don't believe in marriage, whether it's between, you know, guy, girl, two girls, two guys, doesn't matter. They don't believe in marriage. So that would not be a good place to be a wedding photographer. It's not a good business plan. But let's talk about the book, right? The New Art of Capturing Love. Gorgeous book, by the way.
Thank you.
Sal.
Well produced. The quality's there. I'm in the publishing business, so I can really appreciate this. In what really, obviously the content's there, but what I really love about it is the texture, right? We're artists, we love feeling things. So definitely worth picking this up. And it is in, before we get going into it, but it is in bookstores, right?
Yes,
Barnes & Noble,
nationwide.
Amazon.
Yep.
And we'll throw a link up, and you guys can check it out at Amazon. But why? Why the book? What led to it?
Right.
Why don't you tell the story?
Yeah. Well,
this was your fabulous idea.
Well, so I've been photographing gay weddings since 2005, and that very first wedding that I ever photographed, I approached the couple as I would any other couple, right? Who wouldn't?
As far as posing or communication?
One wedding is same as another wedding. A wedding's a wedding. Love is love.
Yeah.
I was very, I was treating them equal. And the funny thing is that, and then I get to the wedding and there's a number of differences, such as this wedding, there was no wedding dress, there was no groom, there was no bouquet, but there was a boutonniere.
Was there a garter toss?
No, definitely not. And the biggie was that this couple, when they shared that ceremonial kiss, it was the first time that they had kissed in front of their extended family.
Wow.
So there were a number of implications, right, that really impacted me. And suddenly I found myself wondering, are they comfortable in front of their parents? How do I pose them? And when I looked at the photos afterwards, I felt like the images looked more like pictures of siblings or friends. I didn't see the intimacy that I found easier to communicate with an opposite sex couple.
That's interesting.
So that was my first experience, and then years went on where I kind of was just, kept at it.
Can I pause you though?
Yeah.
Because you just said something there, which as an artist, as a photographer, our job is to get to that level of intimacy and showcase it in that moment, right? I'm curious. You went back, you looked at your work, you thought to yourself, man, I just didn't capture it.
Right.
What was your assessment at that moment in time of why you believed, right, as our own worst critic, why do you believe you weren't able to capture that?
I think because my only experience photographing two people the same gender was in the case of friends or siblings. The only way to get better at anything is to practice.
Of course.
And I had never practiced photographing a same-sex couple.
That's really interesting.
I had photographed so many weddings, I thought I can show up and do the same thing and get the same results, and it didn't happen.
And by the way, your thought process, I'm going to bet, is not unlike a majority of my audience, and it's like you said in the beginning, they don't really understand. Maybe the wrong word is ignorance, but they don't understand. They're not knowledgeable about it. They don't know what questions to ask. But it's like you said, they have no practice. Where do you go to practice this stuff?
I had great intentions, you know, but intentions only get you so far. And all of it, wedding, images are language. And we all need to sit down and read our images, and we need to listen to what they're telling us. And that really is part of being an artist, right?
Of course.
The next work is in the current work. The questions you have looking at your current work leads to your next work.
Very true.
And so when I saw those photos and I'm thinking, they're just not quite on the mark. And I didn't know why, and so I just kept at it. I kept, making little changes and stuff. And I sat back thinking, all right, at some point somebody's going to offer a workshop in this. Somebody's going to, somebody's going to have a website, a blog, anything. And there was just nothing, and it went on for long enough. And I'm an entrepreneur. I keep a little list of my great ideas.
Oh, she has a lot. They're good ones too.
My black book, man. I got a black book of ideas.
That's right.
And I let them sit for long enough because some of them, even good ideas, are a tremendous amount of work. So, I let that sit for long enough. And I had met Kathryn. She published one of my weddings, and then she actually got me a placement in Newsweek with a same-sex wedding. And so it was just I had the door open.
Yeah.
I gave her a call and I told her what I was thinking, and she was pretty convincing that we should write this book.
Yeah, and this is an awesome project, I think, and again, the knowledge, I think. So in the book, right, you're talking about what? Everything from understanding same-sex weddings to, there's, I think personally as a photographer, there's inspirational photos here.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was your intent or not, but to me, I learn through visual, right? I'm as a photographer, so I want to read, I want to understand, but I also want to visualize and figure out how to do this, because it is not easy. I can tell you that. Taylor and I have had the opportunity to photograph a same-sex wedding for friends of ours who were florists, and me and Taylor, I remember, were like, is that okay? Can we do that? What do you do? And so this is really, really interesting. So in the spirit of what you're saying, and this can go to either one of you or both of you, what is the difference between a traditional wedding and a same-sex wedding?
And if I can, and we'll lead into that bit, one of the things that was really neat about the creation of this book, and I'll add this because we have a little more time to visit casually about the process, but also because if your followers and the folks watching are entrepreneurs, this is the thing that was really interesting about this, was that Thea and I had this conversation, and then we needed decided essentially as strangers, largely, to go into business together. And how do you make a decision if you decide you want to do something, and who is the right person to work with, and how do you approach that in a really good way? So, I mean, to acknowledge Thea, who is fantastic, as you can tell just hearing her speak, but I couldn't have had the opportunity to work with someone more fun to work with, in that we have a very similar way of working. We were both very clear on what it was. We tried to make sure we had it defined. And that's been really important, and it's something that we have both valued through the process. We were looking probably a little bit for it, but it also is something that's just really evolved in realizing this is really quite lovely. And part of that was when we first met at a Panera Bread in
Concord, New Hampshire.
I flew up, and then she drove from the rural sticks where she lives, New Hampshire, and Panera it was. We should go there for our anniversary. We really kind of workshopped it, and this was where we had a very open conversation about the photography world, the gay wedding world, because we each have experience and expertise that the other one does not have. Yeah. So I was able to test out some things I thought I had been seeing. She did the same thing, and as a result, we were both like, oh wow, really that? Oh wow, oh wow. And one thing led to another, to where we had essentially outlined the book after that first couple of days of meeting. And in that, a lot of the conversation was talking about what are the things, if we feel this topic needs to be out there, what do we need to say, how do we need to say it, and who do we need to say it to? So, I sort of think of this as like that next level. So this is not introductory. I mean, it is actually, and we wrote it in a very accessible, friendly way. But we wanted to do more than you could just find to go, well, what is a same-sex wedding? You can find that in there, but we wanted to make sure we were giving photographers a tool to understand what do you need to be aware of, what is it that's happening that you may know, that you may not have thought of, and then how do you work with that within any session, an engagement session, if you're working with two brides or you're working with two grooms. And so in the end, we ended up breaking that down largely into talking about cultural differences and physical differences, and how you have to work through building relationship and trust in order to really be effective. And the last thing I would say, and then please run with that, is that as we looked through this, we didn't do an open call for this book. I had photos that had been submitted to me through gayweddings.com, and we scoured the web looking for the very best same-sex wedding photographer we could find. And we chose our large finalists without saying a word to anyone. We got everything queued up, we got the concept down, we got the website up, and then we invited people to join us.
Nice.
There were a number of reasons for doing that, but what was really cool was we spent time starting with these three criteria. Do these photos demonstrate intimacy? Do they demonstrate believability? And are they authentic? Because for us, this is about authentic love and capturing the couple for who they are.
And that should be the goal of any photographer for any wedding, right?
There you go.
Absolutely.
And something we had talked about earlier was, first of all, these weddings are different, right? And I think it was you, Kathryn, who had mentioned, you got a little bit of heat because people were like, you just photograph them the same as a traditional wedding.
Yeah, we both get heat for that.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest responses that has surprised us, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, but ultimately, it's like we were talking earlier, just say no to dumb, right? It's like they're not the same thing, because it's just like, if I went and photographed a Jewish wedding, that's not photographed the same way. If I photographed a Chinese wedding, that's not photographed the same way. Hindu wedding, right? These are all things where you have to understand the culture, the people, and if you're trying to show love, love is not the same at every single event.
Well, and again, I have to add in that, and I can't believe that the irony of being a gay wedding expert is that I'm going to do a lot of advocating for straight couples today. But I would say that every single couple deserves to be understood for who they are and how they move in the world, and with that, the wedding photography is unbeatable if you're able to help them shine and help them to feel comfortable to be who they are. But it is critical for same-sex couples because of, and maybe you can talk more about some of the posing traps, because we've had a lot more conversations about gender than we ever thought we might have, and what we expect of it, what we're taught about it, and how it.
As far as posing goes,
Oh, yes.
I would say when I run into photographers and it comes to same-sex weddings, the number one question is around posing, guaranteed.
Yep.
Now, but before we go down that path,
Differences?
2 or 3 differences. What are the 2 or 3 main differences between a traditional wedding and a same-sex wedding?
And so there's something interesting in the way you phrase the question too, because I have been to very traditional gay weddings. And in the same way that I have been to very untraditional straight weddings. And so I do think there's a lot of differences between gay weddings and straight weddings. I'm just, it's just, sometimes there are some assumptions that we tend to make based on our life experiences. And I've certainly had some gay couples that are very traditional, and you can photograph them in a traditional way.
Interesting.
Right.
So it's a case-by-case basis.
Case by case.
So
I think what's instructive, one of the words we use in the book or phrase is the old standards.
Right.
Because what you're talking about, I think, in the question really is, how does wedding tradition end up dictating the choice that you make as a photographer when you set up how you will be interacting, what moments that you will capture during the day?
Sure.
Sometimes the couple or the parents of the couple drive that photography list, right? The list of photos that they want for their album. And sometimes a photographer or a planner might drive that.
There's a conversation to be had, is there not?
Correct.
Now, help me through that.
Yeah.
How do you, here's what I find with people, right? Because as a photographer doing what I do, I meet a lot of different people, and I'm always kind of sizing people up, right? What can I ask them? How do I talk to them? I can have a conversation with somebody and be completely blunt, and they'll appreciate that bluntness, or I can have a conversation with someone, be blunt, and offend them. So there's clearly a conversation to be had between a couple. What is the right way to have the conversation where I'm not being offensive?
You want the magic bullet, don't
I
you?
do. I need that magic bullet. Give it to me
here
so I
it
don't
is.
piss somebody off.
Yeah. You ask open-ended and open-minded questions.
So give me an example.
And you can ask what somebody's preferred gender pronoun is.
Gender.
Pronoun.
Okay. And
So-
what would the answer be? What could it be?
I go by he or she.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. And that, because the question that will come up from photographers, right, and I'm thinking about our audience right now, is when it comes to posing, is one the guy, is one the girl? Like, and that is definitely our mindset, trying to take a traditional wedding and apply it here. And so the way to get around that is to ask,
So she has gone ahead actually to some awesome higher level stuff, which is recognizing more complexity in how people express themselves based on gender.
Okay.
So if we were to start more from the basics, let's take it down to a few basic wedding poses that I have been stunned to find are just so run-of-the-mill. It makes perfect sense now, and I see it everywhere. But one of our favorites that we like to talk about is, for example, you've got the contrasting colors, right? Dark tux or dark suit, white gown, and that sets off a lot of decisions that are made visually on what you can do. You've also got a pose where you've got within that, let's say, the gentleman standing there and the woman rests her hand on his chest.
Yes.
It says, Thea, the phrase that Thea has taught me is the neutral space for that hand there. Yeah. And then, it's generally that you've got, that there will be pants and a dress.
Right.
I mean, women can get married in trousers if they want, if they're straight. I mean,
right.
So it's happening probably more than ever with, the sort of openness to how people feel comfortable expressing themselves at their weddings. But so all of these things that we are taught about how weddings work, who gets carried over the threshold, who gets dipped, who sits on whose lap, part of that comes around physical strength and size. Part of that comes out of gender roles. And what ends up happening is that same-sex couples don't necessarily adhere to these prescriptive gender roles. And Thea has also had this insight that she shared, and I thought, boy, this is really true, is that she asked herself the question, am I being fair to my straight couples? Because there are many straight couples today who don't necessarily fit this very traditional setup. For example, these 2 straight women who just heard us speak in Boston the other day, we finished our talk, and they said they got married, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. That was amazing. It made me rethink my wedding photography. This one woman said, there's only one day that I've ever sat on Andrew's knee, and it was that day.
Exactly.
So what happens, though, if you do this with a same-sex couple, and why don't you explain some of the examples of how that can go awry?
And just another example of a good open question to ask is, what are you going to wear?
Okay.
Because same-sex couples are reinterpreting this tradition of wedding attire.
So let me play dumb here, right?
Right.
Let's say I go, okay, what are you going to wear? And
Yeah.
it's two females.
Yep.
And one says, well, I'm going to wear a pantsuit, and the other one says, I'm going to wear a dress.
Right.
Should I start making assumptions that when it comes to posing, I'm not going to answer my own question. I'll
Yeah.
let you answer. Should I start assuming here that now the one in the dress is going to play more of a feminine role, and by feminine role I mean from a posing perspective?
Yep.
Should I assume that?
And so Kathryn's advice is always don't assume, always ask.
Awesome. And it's not offensive to ask, yeah?
If you have trust and rapport with a couple, and you are thoughtful, and you're not counting on them to do your educating, you've
Right.
done your work.
It's just like if I were to photograph a Jewish wedding, a Hebrew wedding, or a Hindu wedding.
Just educate yourself a little bit. You'll know. Because if you're thinking to yourself, wow, I'm worried this is going to be a really bad question, that's your instinct telling you, yes, that's a really bad question to ask, or quite possibly it's going to end up coming out in an awkward way, which is going to make everyone feel even more awkward. And if you ask a couple, and you know this, if you ask a couple or you introduce awkwardness, boop, there goes that moment you were looking for.
Right.
It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of that gets flushed out during the initial consultation.
Absolutely.
When I meet with couples, I can tell in that first meeting with them, because I'm rarely, if ever, showing up on a wedding day and it's like, hey, surprise, I'm Sal, nice to meet you.
Yep.
I've got that rapport that's been developed on an engagement session.
Exactly.
And from that initial consult. So, if I think about how would I attack this, if I had a, gay, luckily my first gay wedding, they were friends of ours. And so they made it really easy on us. Anything we did that was ridiculous, they were like, no. And so we appreciated that, their bluntness towards us. But moving forward, I think to myself, how am I going to attack this? And I feel like communication is the best way. If you act like...
And respectful communication.
Of course, yeah.
But you say of course, but this is the thing, is that sometimes folks aren't taking that extra step
Right.
to recognize how it can end up coming out. So let me give you an example of this. So I talked about the neutral space, right? And photographers, if they've studied the pose books, they go in, well, let me put them in all these different poses. So here's a simple pose on how that works out with your two brides, is even if one is wearing pants, you have one put a hand on the chest, which is no longer necessarily a neutral space. You potentially could quite easily set yourself up to have a photo that ends up looking like it's groping.
Right.
And so here's the thing, clients will do what we tell them. Isn't it amazing?
It is.
I mean, they trust us because we're the experts. So just like you're saying, and that's where that initial consult is so key. And this is great because you have a background in sales. The key is that we have to ask the questions to get the answers, and then we know everything. We know how to sell to a couple. We know how to provide what they want just by asking those smart questions. So it's the exact same thing. It's just you have to start over and think about a lot of these questions. Who's going to come down the aisle first? Or better yet, how are you going to get down the aisle?
Right. Yeah.
There are so many traditions that are just completely reinterpreted and repurposed by same-sex couples that a lot of us kind of have to throw out some of our assumptions.
You're right. If you bring in, and that was the word I was going to use, if you bring in assumptions, any of your just experience, things like that, if you bring that into the equation, you're probably going to end up wrong. And I want to go back to something you said, because I did say, of course, because as a business owner, I just assume common sense, but common sense in today's day and age is not really that common.
Well, and remember, we're here today talking because we're a new frontier.
Right.
So we haven't yet had a chance for common sense. And in fact, a lot of people presume our book is so common sense and they read it. And this includes a lot of people, a lot of photographers, and a lot of people I know who have extensive experience working with same-sex couples who read it and say, I never thought of that. Because there is stuff around the entrenchment of gender roles, particularly in wedding photography and wedding tradition, that we don't even realize. And it sets you down a course where, particularly if you're working with a same-sex couple that is just doesn't really ascribe to traditional gender roles, you end up setting yourself up to have them correct you regularly.
Right.
And that's not a position you
No, and
want
that
to be
takes
in.
away from the
Yeah,
day,
exactly.
and you're no longer the
Correct.
trusted advisor.
Correct.
They don't trust you.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's really
And I
important.
will tell you that it's just changing. because competition is more fierce than ever, and that means that folks are more comfortable speaking for what they need. They have more choice. It's not just whoever was willing to take your phone call.
Right.
But we have traditionally, and this is a gross generalization of the community, but I don't spend a lot of time correcting people or asking for that extra stuff, because it's a scary, vulnerable place.
Sure.
And so a new client in your office may just let something pass, and it may be a small thing. You're looking for a cue to help you inform what you need to do down the road, but they may let it pass because maybe they're older, and this is something that is really uncomfortable and very difficult for them to bring up, to talk about, and they don't want to have to do that.
To say that it bothers them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, if you are accustomed to hiding and being invisible, and this is particularly true for gay male couples who face a much harder road because homophobia is so intense for them. There is so much understanding and discomfort around gay men in our culture that it is you put them in a very difficult, painful situation. And so the hope would be to understand that and to not trigger what I would sort of call these like little wounds that you wouldn't necessarily know you're inflicting. Let me give you a great example that surprised me. I had access to it because I knew this couple. We were working on the revision for this book, and I invited a male couple to come out, and Thea was going to do a session with them. And we were just getting started, and I'm very close with them. We have a great rapport. Thea asked them, "I just want you to walk." It's very simple.
Hold hands and walk.
And then she asked, grab hands. And because I know them, I saw this little, it was imperceptible, this little hitch. They grabbed hands and they kept going. So we got to this little spot where she was sitting them down and switching gears for the next thing she wanted to do. And I said, I have to ask you guys, I noticed when Thea asked you to hold hands, and we were outside in a public area at this hotel we were at, when she asked you to hold hands, you both hesitated. And they were like, absolutely, and they went in and they said, here's this whole thing. One of them was raised by a very conservative family not okay with it. And he's like, number one, my family is not okay, and conservative religiously, is not okay with PDA in general.
Sure.
But number two, add in the gay thing, forget about it. And it's this running joke between them. For the other one who's accustomed to being out, is more comfortable with it. So they were able to overcome it with this little knowing glance, which is what I picked up, was the hesitance and the it's okay.
Yeah.
But it goes to show you that interrupted the flow that she was asking of them. And all she said was hold hands.
Right. Yeah, and I think we have to be conscious of that as professional photographers. But again, that part, I will say, is not just in gay and lesbian weddings, it is in straight weddings as well. I mean, you'll be surprised, and culturally, by the way. So I've done Jewish weddings where they're not allowed to show a public display of affection before the actual ceremony, right?
Yeah.
That's taboo, that's bad. So it is interesting. I do want to switch gears here for a second. I want to ask, we've already talked about this, but gay weddings, are they legal everywhere?
No.
Okay. Take me through a little bit about that, right?
So complicated. It's a great question, and it's very important for professionals.
And before you answer, that is who you're answering for, right? So if you're out there and you're listening, this is an opportunity for you as a business owner, as a photographer, and it's not something that you have to even want to do. It's something that's happening right before all our eyes. And so the question becomes, are you going to embrace it? And what I'm hoping we can shed some light on is, where is it legal? What does the future look like, even if it's just we're guessing at this point? And what's the opportunity look like? Because I think there's a huge opportunity there. So let's talk about the legality of it.
Well, and not that you'll be looking for the magic bullet, the one answer. I will be sending folks to do more research, but let me shed a little light. And in the old days, it used to be I could count in one hand where marriage equality was recognized. It was very simple to keep track of all of it. And now we have 17 states in the District of Columbia where same-sex marriage is recognized. And I like to joke that sort of we knew that things had really changed when nobody was counting DC anymore. It was no longer, whatever, in DC, 17 states. So yes, anyone from DC out there, you'll get that joke. You know what it's like. So
now those 17 states, the ceremony's legal, right? But there are states where people will just have a ceremony.
Oh, sure. So back in 1999, the wedding my partner and I had was not legal. And in the old days, especially in the 90s, when folks were trying to do this, we called them commitment ceremonies. That is a word, a term that we aren't really using in the same ways. Although I know that there are many couples, straight and gay, who are choosing to have commitment ceremonies and not do the legal piece for various reasons.
But as a photographer now, both of those are opportunities for us, correct?
There's no doubt about it.
Right.
And so the things that come up for same-sex couples around this, whether it's legal or not legal, or I should say legal or not recognized, is that it's what are the couples choosing to do. So I have had a legal marriage, which we did last fall after the laws changed, after the Supreme Court overruled Proposition 8 in California and overturned the Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA, which is the nickname, the Perry versus Windsor decision. And that's because we have access to federal benefits that we did not have access to before, even though we live in a non-marriage equality state, Virginia. Okay? So we chose to have a legal elopement, which we did book a photographer for. So yes, there's a business opportunity in that. But we did not do the same thing we did in 1999, which was a full-on wedding. So there are things to think about this, and this we talk about in the book, is recognizing that couples will have city hall elopements. Right. They will have legal elopements that are a little bigger, but they might be planned, they might be sudden. There are couples who have small, intimate backyard weddings. There are couples that have full-on, this couldn't be more exciting weddings. And in some ways, the legal component of that doesn't really matter so much to the photographer per se. Here's where it does, and this is on the business side. So number one, to be knowledgeable about what's happening in your market means that you can take better care of your couples because they don't necessarily know, and they may have questions.
Right.
You may find that you want to develop some really important, significant photos around the courthouse session, because this is a big deal for us. I never, ever hear a straight couple talk about going to apply for a marriage license. I always hear about a gay couple going to talk about getting a marriage license.
It's like a civil rights movement of sorts, isn't it? I mean,
it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
As I like to say, we are putting the marriage back in weddings.
I love it. Nobody have a better wedding rate than traditional weddings. You know, I always tease my couples. I'm like, look, the first wedding's full price. Second wedding's 50% off, because you know the divorce rate is just incredible.
I think most people start talking babies at that point.
Yeah.
Well, see, but with somebody, so I was talking with my wife after we presented in Boston, because one of the points I said was, well, at our second wedding, and Amy was like, that sounds terrible. I'm like, well, but it's true. We have been married twice, but we haven't left each other. But so these serial weddings also happen for us. The thing that's changing is when we get to federal marriage equality, we don't need to know what's happening in every state. You don't need to anticipate the excitement and the sudden city halls that are happening. Actually, I know you won't be showing this live today, but today is also the day that couples are actually getting legally married in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Hello.
That's
big
crazy.
change.
Yeah,
big
in Arkansas, they're freaking out.
So things are happening, and in hopefully 2 years' time, that's not the conversation we're having anymore.
Right. I think, and you're spot on. Over time, this is not a novelty anymore. It's just normal. As it should be.
And beyond the novelty part, it is incredibly complex right now. The most complex it has been and will be, because there are different court cases, there's different recognition, there's different marital status.
I actually do want to go into the legal part of this, and the reason I chose novelty.
When is the lawyer going to get here?
Yeah, we need my attorney here. But the reason I chose novelty is because I think right now the world of photography is kind of looking at this like, maybe I want to do it, maybe I don't want to do it, and that's why I chose the word novelty, because the reality is you're not going to have a choice.
Yes.
It's just there, and I want to go into the legal part of this, which is, I already know the answer, but there have been legal cases where photographers have been sued and lost because they're trying to claim it's against my religion. Help me expand on that for me.
Right.
What are you seeing? What are some experiences or cases you can talk about?
Well, it's not just happening in photography. There are definitely cases, and I will say that I have a lot of compassion for the business owners who feel very nervous about this. And I will tell you that my experience talking with wedding professionals across the country, the majority of them are unsure or willing about serving and working with same-sex couples, but they're not mean. And they find ways to have respectful conversations with introductory calls. Or couples realize that they're not necessarily sort of...
well, exactly. I can't imagine a same-sex couple wanting a photographer there to document their day that doesn't believe in their day, right?
Well, the one case in New Mexico, though, was an inquiry for services, and they just said, we don't do your weddings.
Yeah.
Basically. I mean, to paraphrase.
Right. I know. And
So, but these are the cases, what people end up thinking though, is now I'm setting myself up, and actually this was an avoidable situation.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, by
Yeah.
the way. It would be the same thing, to me it's no different than if a Jewish couple called me and I just said to them on the phone, I don't do your wedding, I don't do your type, you know, or anything like that. It's just, it's ignorant. But there are other ways to handle that and it not turn into what it did. But the reality is, and this is where precedence has been set, I cannot turn down a same-sex wedding because it's against my religious belief or because it's my business. This is the other thing that's out there circulating in my community where they believe, well, it's my business, I can photograph anyone I want. It's actually inaccurate.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
This is a public
Well, you
space.
can,
this is
but
commerce.
you're going to be liable.
Well, exactly. Yeah, sure. You can say, hey, I'm not going to photograph anyone in a
And-
wheelchair.
exactly.
Good luck with how that ends up.
And now there is precedence.
Right. And that's the key. There is precedent. So again, if you're watching out there, you need to educate yourself on this as a business owner, period. Maybe this isn't something you think you want to do or embrace, and that's totally your call. But legally, you can't just turn down a wedding because it's a same-sex wedding. That there is precedence for that, and you will, as a business owner, pay the price for that.
But any photographer, you know, we all have clients that aren't the right match for us.
Yes.
So if you have a client that's not the right match for you, what do? You have to communicate that to them. You could refer them out to somebody you think would be a better match. And like Kathryn's saying, you just do this in a respectful way.
I think that's
There's
key.
no
And
reason to be hateful.
I think that particular case escalated because it was not done in a respectful way.
Yeah, she put it in writing.
Yeah.
That she did
Well,
not.
and everyone is sensitive right now. We're in a time of change. Some of us do better with change than others, and it can be incredibly complicated, especially if you feel on the spot and that professionally you're going to have to respond in a way that you don't feel prepared to respond.
So how big of a market do you think this is? When it comes to same-sex weddings, I'm not looking for a price tag, but as an entrepreneur, if you're talking to entrepreneurs out there, how big of an opportunity do you think this is?
Well, there are a lot of, it depends about that. I have always said and been concerned by the storyline of gay weddings as a magic cure for the economy. Although this expanding segment came at a very important time as we were struggling in the U.S. economy. And the other thing that is, I think, misleading, and again the market is changing, is we've had pent-up demand. So those of us that had been waiting to get married, we will all be married. You know what? And I'm going to be sad. I'm going to miss this. The couples who are my age or older, who've been together for years. I mean, I feel like I want to cry every time I see a couple that's been together for 50 years, and I think, what have you been through?
Yeah.
Especially these male. I just saw a picture of a male couple that had been together for more than 50 years, and they're just now getting legally married. And I think, and they have survived against, I mean, all the odds.
Yeah.
All the odds if they've been together for 50 years. I can't even imagine. So we will lose some of those stories because what's going to happen is our relationships will take more of what I call sort of the natural progression, which is engagement period, your dating engagement, and then you get married. And you know, we're seeing this already show up. We never had engagement photos, and I get engagement sessions all the time now. So this is this thing, and now we're doing these public proposals, and you know, it's we are beginning to follow more of the rhythm of the mainstream industry. So for photographers, to your point about what does this mean as a business owner, you as photographers stand to make a different margin in servicing a wedding than an officiant might. So I would say the question is, what do you end up billing? What services do you offer? How many more clients make this an appealing market growth for you? So for some, adding 1 or 2 more couples to a portfolio in a year is great.
Yeah.
It's
could be
great.
Big money. Well, I think in the number in the United States is there's 2.1 million weddings last year, and I'm going to bet money that number probably doesn't include a whole lot of same-sex weddings. And that data, I'm not sure. I wonder if that data is even available yet to know that, you know, last year there were 10,000 same-sex weddings, because that would be a really interesting number to watch.
Well, one of the surprising, I don't even want to call it a byproduct, and this happened in, was it New York? No, Washington, D.C. was where I think we first saw this. Washington, D.C. or New York. They basically changed the language on the marriage certificates, partner 1, partner 2, basically, name 1, name 2. But what ended up happening was the only way they could compare the growth, how many same-sex couples do we think got married, was they had to compare sort of year over year. What was the percentage increase we saw in marriage license requests
Oh, wow.
over this same period the year prior? Because it didn't specify. It was name one, name two. It wasn't like, oh, it's bride-groom or bride-bride. Or they couldn't necessarily tell. So I am sure to a level they were careful about that as well, but it was one of these little data consequences that people didn't recognize. You couldn't easily answer the question. Since then, you know, I know that in 2008, they had the count that 18,000 same-sex couples got married in that brief window. Utah is, I want to say it was 2,000.
Really?
I can't remember the number, but they had about 2 or 3 weeks, and they all ran, wondering, you know, is this going to end? Let's get married in the window.
Because that did happen in Boston, right? They approved it, and then there was like this. Am I off on this?
California was where it was approved.
Okay, California.
And then there were 6 months of a window, and then word was on the street like, wait a minute, this ballot initiative is coming. So it was put on the ballot, and the voters decided they would vote on the civil rights of other LGBT Americans. And as a result, that employed a constitutional amendment, and so same-sex marriage stopped. And so we had this waiting period from 2008 to 2013 as we waited for that case to work its way through the California Supreme Court and then eventually through the appeals court and the Supreme Court. And that was one of the big decisions that just came through in 2013. So, I mean, this is a great example of explosion. 2008, different time, any couple in that area, all of the Californians wanting to go and get legally married, so a much bigger spike. You know, the folks, whoever the 50th state is last to the party, you're going to have a few folks. There will be folks wanting to celebrate. There are people who live in those states. You know, and I think New York and Mayor Bloomberg, like, I think he understood this. He had the single best jurisdictional campaign saying, we are a destination town. We want to recognize and embrace and welcome our couples. Let's do this. They had a website. They went, you know, full on for it. And because they were earlier to the table, they had opportunity within that. Whereas you think about, you know, Connecticut recognizes same-sex marriage, but whoops, we don't remember that, you know, Massachusetts.
Right, it's going to be the first movers in anything you're doing. And again, to bring it back to the world of photography, if you want to make a niche for yourself, because that is my next question, and this is geared more towards you.
Sure.
How do you, okay, right, I've got an audience, they're watching, they're like, I get it, Sal, there's an opportunity, I want to be part of this. How would someone go and start just down the path of servicing same-sex couples?
Yeah. Step
Read
one,
our book, obviously.
Yeah, step one,
Obviously,
read the book.
with the book.
And then get out there and photograph some same-sex couples. Get some experience. You need to change the language on your website. You've got to ditch the bride. Our only client is no longer the bride. I mean, that's just the reality.
That's actually a really interesting point.
You need to ditch a lot of terms, bridal party. And you need to practice using more inclusive wedding language, because it does take time to change old habits.
So let me play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
What about the photographer? Because I've been asked this. This is why I'm asking this question. Should I create a separate business to service same-sex weddings because I don't want to offend my other clients?
Actually, that's the wrong reason to consider it.
Okay, no, let's do this, because this question was posed to me.
I've gotten this question all the time, and I will tell you my answer has changed as times have changed.
Okay, so answer that question.
So bottom line is we are moving toward you know, weddings are weddings, marriage is marriage, right? We are all one market, and this is one segment. There are some folks who have a setup, and they have some niche specialties within that, and their websites are built where they have Indian weddings, green weddings. Great, so you can do that. If you go build a whole separate business out, there are pros and cons. You may end up being seen as someone who treats it as separate but not equal. You may also find you have an opportunity to market differently, because you can actually work with the keywords in a way which supports building out exposure in a niche market.
That's true too.
I will say that the wrong reason is doing it because you're worried to offend other clients, and here's why. When you look at polling, it is insane the numbers and what people think about marriage equality and supporting it. And particularly, who is the wedding market largely? The millennials. What do the millennials say? What is the problem?
Exactly.
And I will tell you, our greatest allies are our straight allies, and they are the ones who are most vocal about saying, what? I'm not going to hire you because you say you're not gay friendly. Straight couples, because they want to work with photographers, caterers, bakers, venues, you name it, who recognize their gay brothers and sisters who are going to be in the wedding, who want to support their relationships.
You're exactly right. The fact that we're having this conversation right now, the fact that, you know, I've got Kristen Corpus in my magazine who writes about this topic, and you guys are coming to Shutterfest, right? So you heard it here.
It's on the record.
The fact that we're willing to do it versus other conferences it's the same thing. I feel the same way. It's like, this is something I believe in. No, I'm not gay. I'm not getting married to another man, but I still believe in equality. And that's what it ultimately comes down to. So, if I can bring awareness to the subject, that's what I want. And I'm with you on this, Kathryn, that I think my potential bride and grooms, they want to work with a photographer who supports their gay brother or gay sister, right? They want that, and they don't want somebody who's going to shun down on them.
Right.
So, and I would not create a separate website.
Right. Well, and so I think it's just, what's your decision making? How do you do it, and why do you do it, and what does that final product look like?
I don't even understand the logic
questions.
though, right? I'm going off on a rant here.
Well,
so I create a separate website, right? What am I going to do at the wedding? Like, hope nobody sees me? I hope no straight people see me. Like it's the most ignorant thing in the world. So,
right. Well, I can tell you though, there are stories out there of people who have lost business.
Right,
So
I do believe
it
that.
happens, and if someone, let's say that their margin is one, that losing one big client, because they also do a number of other milestone celebrations for that family, or however the setup is, because business is not as easy to come by, this could be problematic. So I want to say things have changed.
Yeah.
I respect the fear, and for some professionals, there are some really intensely valid concerns. And so the message that I offer is, number one, the young couples who are looking to get married, they are going to stand by you. But additionally, when we did this survey with WeddingWire, we're industry partners. I do a lot of consulting. I'm an expert for WeddingWire, education expert for them. And we did a survey, and 82% of wedding professionals said they plan on serving same-sex couples. I mean, that's an overwhelming majority.
Right.
So people are there. So I wrote one article for them where I basically said, look, if you've been waiting for your wingman, he's here. You've got friends who are looking out for you, and it is no longer, those sort of the pioneers have come and gone. So, so you have more friends than you know. You have support. There are people that you can talk this through with, and you have to be thoughtful and respectful in the questions you ask, and you have to know your business, and you need to know your market.
True. You are definitely more patient than I am. For me, it's just like, stand for something. And sometimes I think when I look at my business and my path and my decisions, I've been willing to stand up for just something I believe in, and just moments like this. You guys have been amazing. I want to re-highlight the book before you go. So, The New Art of Capturing Love. It can be Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and it is definitely the launch point. If you're interested in getting into same-sex weddings, this is in fact the launch point for you to break into that. You've got inspiration in here, you've got education in here, and you two, I'm trying to convince to start doing your own workshops. So you need to write in. If you're interested in same-sex weddings, I'm curious if these two, because I'm trying to twist their arm into doing it, were to have a 1 or 2 day workshop. Is that even something you'd be interested in, where we had two females, 2 males, and we went through posing and we went through just the business of it? I really think you guys could be onto something. So stay tuned, because I know you're trying to get me to do it, and you guys be part of it. So maybe we'll do that. But what I need you to do right now is get social. So I want to know your aha moment, things that just really rang true for you. And the winner will get a copy of The New Art of Capturing Love. We'll get that out to you. But hashtag Shutter Network, hashtag Capturing Love, and go out to Twitter or Facebook, and we'll be there. So stay tuned. Next week, we got another great episode for you. Again, look these guys online. Where can we find more information? Gayweddings.com.
Yep. CapturingLoveGuide.com.
And CapturingLoveGuide.
And if you're looking for a photographer in New England,
yeah,
nothing better than
Yes,
authenticguide.com.
Thea, if you're looking for
she's
a photographer
so
in New
modest.
England, she is modest. She was quiet. She doesn't talk, but she's an amazing photographer. We had to pull it out of you, but you did great. So we'll see you guys next week.